Welcome, everybody, to the second episode of the AI Basecamp podcast. My name is Jonas Petersen, and today we're going to talk about how to estimate the ROI, return of investment, for a machine learning project. And we're going to always give you the general framework and then enrich with a specific example. I'm joined, as last time, by Aleksander Obuchowski, our head of AI at K2. Alex, a few quick words about today's episode.
Yeah, I think we want to obviously focus on the general principle, but also give you a concrete examples about our projects that we did, because it's not always an easy answer. So we want to pretend that we have answer to everything, but we want to get from our experience and sort of share the details. I think it will be like the theme of today's episode.
And we're gonna focus or do the whole thing in 6 steps. For quantifying the ROI of a machine learning project, we recommend you start by defining goals and metrics, number 1. You then need to estimate cost and benefits using what you defined in step 1, the goals and metrics. As a third step, you can calculate an ROI. Then you need to adjust the ROI, taking into account net present value, internal rate of return, a sensitivity analysis. We're going to go into those. And this 5th step, you need to compare the ROI, or you should always compare the ROI for the specific use case you're evaluating here with other options that you have to get opportunity costs. And as final step, you should communicate the ROI. Very importantly, to communicate the results to all stakeholders involved to then come closer to making a decision of where to actually focus your resources. To start with the first step, goals and metrics. The goals will usually ultimately boil down to improving profits of your business. There can be social aspects also, but we're in capitalism. Usually we're profit driven in the end. We do have 5 or 6 very common metrics. One will be increasing your revenues. Another will be reducing your costs, but going together with that, also improving efficiency of the specific process you're aiming or targeting at the moment is a common one. Enhancing the quality of an output you're producing, be it a text or something else, and boosting customer satisfaction. Also, very common metric that we find. You can go into further granularity, but those 5, just to give you starting examples, are very common, and they boil down to improving bottom line of your business ultimately. The important sentence that often comes up there, and it's very catchy, so I'm also going to mention it here, risking that some of you have heard it before, but metrics should be SMART, S-M-A-R-T. They should be specific, clearly defined, they should be measurable, they should be quantifiable, achievable, realistically set. They should be relevant, aligned with the goals, and they should be time-bound. You need a set timeline for achieving them. And Alex, to keep it, or to not keep it abstract and become a bit more concrete, maybe we can start with a concrete example where we defined goals and metrics for a machine learning project in order to get the ROI estimation.
Okay, so with any predictive model, the simplest metric that everybody knows is accuracy. So putting in simple terms, how many examples does the model get right out of all the examples that are thrown into it? But it doesn't really give you a much detail into what type of the mistakes the model make. And it's essentially, you have two types of mistakes. False positive, when the model predicts someone as a desired class or response, and it shouldn't be of this class. And false negative, when the model doesn't label an example and just leaves it unclassified, but it should be classified as a specific class. And we will go into it in the next example, but those 2 types of mistakes essentially can have different costs for your business. Because, for example, if you are doing, I don't know, a population screening test, when the model's role is to pick out of the general population people that have high risk of some disease and should be put through additional tests. In this case, the false positive is not that harmful, because we will lose some money for the testing people that shouldn't be tested, or there is no need to test them. But false negative is more problematic, because someone that should have this test wouldn't get them, and it's obviously a huge loss for both the system and the specific people. But for example, if you are doing like experimental therapy, when only people that have certain qualifications should be put to this therapy, and it could be harmful for others, then false positive is the type of mistake that is really hurtful and is associated. I know in the end we are talking about costs, but obviously you need to care also about your, let's say, clients. So the personal gain or loss for them is also very important. But also, pretending that we are only, strictly pragmatic and talk only about costs, still the potential lawsuits or cost of mistakes like that can be pretty high. So in the end, as I said on the previous episode, we probably need to do a separate whole episode about different metrics, because there's quite a lot of them. But the two most important types of mistakes that you need to keep in mind are false positive and false negative. And we'll give concrete example of how to use them in projects in the next section.
And what you, in an enriching way there, did is you took the overarching business goal, like enhancing quality or reducing cost of a process, and broke it down with specific examples in the machine learning domain, right? And do you think it's a good idea to try and give many different examples today, or should we try to set the frame for one that we come back to at every of the 6 steps of the way? I think we can go either way, but which one would you prefer for today, Alex?
I think it's good to give a few examples for each case, but maybe not to dwell on specific use cases. Just a quick glimpse of what does it mean.
I'm gonna give you the second one and see which example you have there then. So now, once we have goals and metrics for our specific use case, we need to estimate costs and benefits before we can go to first initial ROI calculation. And the general framework view on costs will be, you should look at stuff like data acquisition costs. Your machine learning module will inevitably require data, and acquiring this data is costly, generally, depending on the situation at the client or at your company. It can be very costly. The infrastructure that's already in place or that you need to set up for data pipeline, and then also monitoring continuous operation. In broad terms, obviously, software, talent, the amount of people that you need to involve, that you're estimating you need to get the project done, potential training, testing costs, security, but also indirect costs that are related to it. And on the other side, the benefits that you're hoping to get out of a successful implementation of an ML solution will again also come down to, and I'm trying to talk at a general level here. It should be stuff like you can improve sales potentially, reduce error rates. So the thing that you were mentioning in the concrete classification example from the point before is save time in the processes. So for your employees, so they can focus on other things. You might be able to move people to different tasks. It can again improve customer loyalty if you have some service enhancements, and maybe give you a competitive edge that then again can lead to sales growth or enhanced satisfaction. And to estimate these costs and benefits on a general level, it is sometimes really tough. The things that are, I think, good recommendations are to look at, as you can, historical data or comparable solutions that you or another source where you have some knowledge have done before, or if you work with a consultancy, they might have done a similar use case before, and they can quite draw on a rich experience there and come to more reliable estimations of costs and benefits. You can use benchmarks, and in the end, you will have to do some projections on decent assumptions.
Maybe let's give a few more examples of tip for this specific category. So firstly, data acquisition. As you said, data can be quite expensive because, all those different companies that aren't even traditionally data companies, such as New York Times or news articles or hospitals or companies like that, they start to realize that their data is really valuable. And a few years ago, they could even give it, for free, just to support some projects or they didn't really care about, but right now they're realizing that there is a value. So also, when you look about, for example, you want to use free data sets that are openly available, always check the licenses, because some data might be there, but it may not be available for commercial use. And again, the data may be free, but the lawsuit after that won't be free. When looking at the infrastructure, it is also not so easy nowadays, because you essentially have two ways. You can build your own infrastructure, so buy a workstation with GPUs, possibly for machine learning, or you can use cloud providers. But there are many cloud providers, and all of them have different pricing. We actually, in K2, we did some consulting only on the pricing of different GPU providers to help our clients pick the best GPU provider, and it involved some benchmarks. It was project for 2 months, so it's not very easy also to estimate it. But you also have to keep in mind that if you buy the infrastructure yourself, it is higher upfront cost, but it might be useful in the future, because if your GPU will be running 24/7, it will become profitable to buy your own infrastructure in a year or so, or even quicker than that, depending on the GPU. So if you are thinking long term, maybe consider buying instead of using cloud. Obviously, you need to set it up, so there are additional personal costs, etc. Software for machine learning applications, most of the software is free. I wouldn't, worry much about the cost of the software itself, unless you are using some outside services to label your data, for example, or stuff like that. Talent and training. This is also important, in my opinion, to keep in mind how your team is growing. So when you do some project that is very new, obviously the team needs to spend some time on training, researching new topics, etc. But it is not only a cost, but it is also an opportunity or even profit for you, because they acquire some knowledge that they can use for different projects. So keep in mind that, it might be worth it to spend a few weeks or even a month just researching some topic, because it might be useful for other projects, and build internal value and internal knowledge of the team. Because if you just use out-of-the-shelf cloud providers or hire subcontractors for other projects, you're not building any internal knowledge in the team, and it might be cheaper, when you set it up, but in the long term, it is always worth to build some knowledge internally.
So, like, what we do see is that the cost and benefits estimation will be a very, very tough part. But I think with the pointers we gave, it makes it a bit more structured to come to a conclusion. And the third point now that we mentioned initially, so actually calculating the ROI, is a step that we can probably keep quite brief, because once the second very difficult part of estimating costs and benefits has been carried out, the ROI is simply net benefits over costs, and then you can convert it to percent. The positive ROI will mean that the investment is profitable. Negative ROI means the investment is losing money. So if your ML initiative, say, costs £100,000 and you estimate it to generate 150,000 in net benefits, then the ROI before adjustment for time value of money will be 50%. As easy as that. Maybe Alex, a quick. Do you want to give an example for this? I think it's more a simple mathematical formula, and we can move on to adjusting the ROI. Yeah.
Yeah, again, it can be tricky, but let's give an example. Essentially, recently there was a case of Air Canada when they wanted to use a chatbot on their helpline, and essentially the chatbot gave. Let's not go into the details, but let's just say the bot gave wrong advice to a customer, and the customer followed that advice. It was wrong, and then sued the Air Canada. And in the end, won the lawsuit, and it was about, I think, $1,500 or something like that. And the company decided to disable the chatbot. So what can we learn from this? because using chatbot on your website lowers your costs, obviously, but it lowers the cost insignificantly because you save a few cents, maybe a few dollars per customer if you are using chatbot instead of real humans. Because humans and chatbots are obviously chatbots are more efficient. They are also cheaper, but the cost isn't also dramatic because ChatGPT, etc., also costs money. So you save money, but a small amount. But if the loss is if the chatbot is wrong, the potential loss is huge. So you have to again look at the types of the mistakes that you have to evaluate the model, the end solution, and look at the types of mistakes that the model makes. So what I'm essentially getting into it. So when you present, for example, the ROI to stakeholders, probably the person that was responsible for this project just calculated how much they would save per each customer, multiplied it by the large number of customers, and got impressive ROI percentage. But they probably didn't take into account, or at least didn't do it, responsibly, the potential loss also, the potential lawsuits, etc. Because even if it happens one every 10,000 customers, you still have to pay $1,500 there, and also there is bad PR and all this stuff. So just to keep in mind when you're calculating the ROI, the end formula, it's not only the positive sides, but also have to include the possible negative sides of automating some process or including AI model. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't put chatbots on your website, but you have to really think about it. Maybe your process is really simple, and giving customers wrong information once in a while is not the end of the world. But for a critical stuff like airline travel, healthcare, banking, etc., those mistakes, even if they are, very rarely,
it can still be extremely costly.
Yeah.
And the issue there, though, to obviously be honest and then transparent, is that if it's an issue that only occurs once every 10,000 times, or even less frequently, it will be very hard to get the frequency estimate correctly. You can do pilots, you can look at comparable solutions, but essentially, I guess a good way to go about things like this. So in this case, I think it was the customer requested a refund, and the chatbot promised, it is within our policy to refund this fully. Is to look at the worst case scenarios that could happen, quantify how bad and how likely they are, and make decisions also based on those. I think that is important there. Maybe to also add the time value of money. So number 4, we said adjust ROI is important. We need to consider that if we invest into an ML project today, it will only pay back over time. Hopefully it will, but it will take time. So we need the net present value. We need to discount. We should, along with that, look at the internal rate of return. So the rate of return that we will get from this project based on how much we're investing initially and the nominal values that we receive every year from it, discounted by a rate, the internal rate of return. If that leads to a net present value of 0, then we have indeed found the internal rate of return. And this is closely related to the opportunity cost. So if we,
maybe I want to jump in real quick right here, because it's really tricky to estimate the long-term return. If the return on investment for ML project is quite long, it is hard to estimate because the landscape is changing. Last year we didn't have ChatGPT. This year, new models from OpenAI such as Sora and Midjourney version 6, etc. They all emerge. So your competitive advantage that you gain from the ML project may not be there in a year or so. So I would be quite skeptical when planning long-term return on investments with ML projects, because the landscape can change really quickly. So just be cautious there.
And obviously the solution that you might invest months to develop, like last week you were talking about synopsis shortening service, is something that could, in 6 months from now, with a better model or a simplified API, be something that is just available off the shelf. So that is a risk that needs to be considered. And need to try to quantify it, and that can make or break a decision to go for a project. But what you can, I think, even more long-term quantify is status quo versus your initiative. Right? If you keep a status quo with, say, you have no ML support or only very limited ML support, and you quantify that against the initiative that is on the table, the use case that you want to implement, you can quantify that even multiple years into the future, and you can come to an internal rate of return of this project. But then you want to, and I completely agree with your point, also consider the likelihood of some off-the-shelf or more powerful solution becoming available in the near future that would present a much easier path to implementation. Right?
Yeah,
Then
definitely. And
you-
the status quo will also get worse because your competitors will also acquire AI solutions. So it's not like everybody else will stay in place. You
Yes.
obviously need to
Yes.
invest to stay ahead of them. But I'm just saying that, invest in machine learning. I think it is necessity. The landscape is changing, etc. But when deciding on specific project, A versus B, maybe prioritize projects that have shorter return on investment because the situation might be more complicated in a few years.
Because the risk of being incorrect or further off with your quantification or your estimation is lower, and you should price in risk. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. I
It's
think that is
essentially
it.
like the chaos theory. You can predict the weather tomorrow quite accurately, but if you try to predict the weather in a month and or in a few years, it's impossible, right?
Becomes less and less accurate, or even completely impossible. The next point on our agenda, the penultimate one, is number 5: compare the ROI, and we already kind of jumped into it. So if we have an adjusted ROI with time value of money, and we tried best we could to quantify internal rate of return, we need to then also look around at potential other things we could be doing with the investment. It's a very common thing, but we need to talk about it here for completeness. We want the opportunity cost of the investment. So by investing $1 into this ML project or a pound, what are we missing out on? What else could we have done with this pound hadn't we invested it here? Maybe also let's enrich that with a concrete case. Probably goes along the lines of what we already mentioned.
Yeah. What comes to my mind firstly is the inventor's dilemma with large companies such as Google, Amazon, etc. It is most profitable for them to focus on their core business and don't invent any new stuff because the opportunity cost is so high. So because if they, for example, decided to do some new, cool, very on-edge technology, they would have to throw massive resources on this project, and they wouldn't focus on their core product, that is like the money maker, the most profitable thing in the company. So they often tend to buy smaller companies and ready-to-use solutions because they already did the experimentation themselves, and the company itself can focus on the core product. For smaller companies, ML projects, I think the people are the most expensive part, right? Because you have to, if you want to use good AI engineers, you have to spend quite a lot of money. So think about what those people could be doing. And it's not only project A versus project B, but for example, time spent on the meetings or stuff that aren't important. Think about that, for example, if you have, 10 hours a meeting, 10 hours of meeting a week, those people could spend those 2 hours working on a specific project that brings you money. So that's also something to keep in mind. But when evaluating the project itself, also think about what those people could be doing if they don't spend. Because and we had such projects, like some manager or someone came to us and said, I would really like to have this feature. And then we saw it and we admitted that, yeah, this feature is quite cool. But then looking at all the other projects that we have in backlog, and we talked with other stakeholders, etc., we decided not to do it because other projects are more profitable and more urgent. So if the thing is cool, it's not like, the only metric. You also have to consider what else what other things are there essentially.
The cost of missing out on something potentially better is a very good argument to cancel something or not pursue a project further. And Alex, we're approaching the 30-minute mark, not quite yet, but we're also approaching the last point, which is good in my opinion. We might be able to keep it below half an hour. We say the last point on the agenda today, number 6, is that you need to communicate the ROI. So we have now calculated, adjusted, and compared it, but we need to communicate it with all relevant stakeholders. And what's very important there is to not just have a clear story and shiny visuals, but also the evidence or also assumptions and uncertainties that led you to the ROI, to have it presented in a transparent way. Because ultimately, people will have underlying motivations, but ultimately what you should be trying to get at is the best decision. And the best decision can only be made if you're completely transparent also about the uncertainties and the assumptions that were key to reaching the ROI estimation that you had. So methodology, assumptions, and limitations, mentioning those is always paramount as well. And if there are concerns or questions that the stakeholders raise regarding the analysis, then you will have to fight and you might lose. But if you then do lose, then it was because you were transparent and hopefully in the process of reaching the right decision. Because what we want to do with calculating the ROI best we can is guide the decision of where to spend the resources for maximum benefit.
Yeah, I think the clear communication is a key here, because most people are reasonable and respond to numbers and respond to, information.
Emotions as well, but yes,
Yeah,
you should always listen to numbers to a certain extent.
Yeah, but for example, if some even if you are a team leader and you obviously have some boss on top of you and other managers in the company, if someone comes to you and says you really need to do this feature because I like it very much, it's super important right now, instead of saying like, no, your idea is stupid, I won't do it, maybe say, okay, my team, I could do it, but then we won't be working on this other project that is approved by the board, that is calculated to bring revenue around this and this number, and it will be, opportunity cost with that. So if you really want us to do it, we can do it, but convince the board, convince others that their projects that are more profitable will be put on hold. And when you put it like that, most of the people like okay, never mind, I don't want it, because they know that it's their responsibility then to convince others that this feature is super important. And also from the positive examples, for example, if you have this really cool idea of AI model and you want, or you see that the competitors are doing and you want to pitch it to your boss that we should have something like that, develop it ourselves or hire a outside company, doesn't matter, but you want something like that. Also think in terms of how much it could save the company. How much does it cost? For example, to hire outside firm to do it would cost X amount of money, and it would save us 2X amount of money a year. If you present it like that, most people are reasonable and will follow your suggestions. But if you present it like, we need this feature because this is super cool, period, most people won't respond to that. So have the concrete numbers to communicate with others. And I think then most of the people
have them for your project. Sorry, just to quickly jump in, but also demand them from the competing options is maybe just something I'd add. So like often, as you say, it is a matter of distributing the limited resources you have across a range of possible things you could do next. And while you want to justify yourself in a transparent way with the project that you're currently pursuing or responsible for, you also very much should have the right in a well-functioning organization to demand the same from competing options.
Yeah, exactly. And as I said, even the competing options, it sort of can be your advantage. That probably if the people aren't really passionate about the project that they want to pitch you, they won't even bother creating this breakdown of the costs, etc. It's also a good initial way to verify if the project is really important, because if nobody is willing to, crunch the numbers and do the hard analysis, it's also probably an indicating that nobody cares about this project.
Fully agreed, and I think good point to wrap it up here. Alex, thanks so much for episode number 2 on this time how to do the ROI quantification. Next episode, just to already put that out there, will possibly be with an external guest. We are gonna follow the plan of talking always about how to add value with AI to your business concretely, but we will enrich with every third episode with an external guest who can bring an outsider's perspective while still staying within topic. For today, thanks so much, Alex. Pleasure as always. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Jonas. And if you like the episode, remember to like, subscribe, and follow us on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts.
See you all in the next one. See you, everybody.
See you. Thank you for listening to AI Basecamp podcast. If you need help implementing AI solutions, go to K2AI and book a free consultation today.